And right now you are, and please accept the recording, you're looking at an image from a 1998 book by Albert Cullum called "The Geranium on the Windows Just Died, Seal Just Died, but the Teacher, You Went Right On." And this was one of a number of critiques in the late 90s, 1998, of any approach to education that put the subject matter entirely in the center and forgot about the lives that children and communities were leading. Similarly, we could, as we begin today's conference, imagine that it was in a total vacuum, that we are Torah Lishma and Hinuch Lishma, education and learning totally for its own sake. But that's not quite true, is it? And I'm going to make a few opening remarks about I should now be back with you.
Jeffrey, I think you just want to stop your share.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Got it. Okay, so I note that our numbers have grown, and I do want to make some comments now about that opening image that we saw in terms of when this conference is happening. And clearly, we're happening during the middle of the month of Cheshvan. And I want to say that the rabbis who shaped the tradition in many ways could be quite deceptive in suggesting that this particular month is a quiet month. In fact, they call it Mar Cheshvan, the bitter month of Cheshvan, bitter because all the great holiday celebrations of Tishrei are gone. So I'd like you to raise your hand if you are feeling that that you really want a half dozen more chagim to interrupt your educational goals for the year. I think the rabbis underappreciated regularity and what comes to us after the holidays. And they would have no way of knowing what an extraordinarily eventful month we're living through. Just think of Cheshvan for a moment. We've lived through now 2 cycles of elections of places we care deeply about in Israel and yesterday in the United States. We had a blood moon, pretty eventful. And by the end of Cheshvan, we collectively, the Jewish people, particularly those in Jerusalem, will celebrate the major Chag, the biggest Chag on the calendar of Beta Israel, of Ethiopian Jews, this covenant renewal ceremony of Sigid. So Cheshvan is full of amazing things. And I want to point out 2 more of them, and then we'll move into the conference itself. One of them is that today, this very day, November 9th, 84 years ago, was Kristallnacht, was the night of violence and bloodshed in Germany that was in some ways a prelude to the Holocaust. So that reality of shard glass coming into our lives, cuts and bruises, is very, very real. We pause for a moment to acknowledge that and to acknowledge the many people who have family connections, Jewish people connections that go all the way back to Germany and Kristallnacht. Just a moment of silence for that. And now, to put one further frame on the conference, I want to note that yesterday, November 8th, was the 39th yahrzeit of Mordecai Kaplan. And to me, there's a correspondence that we want to note. Sadness, bloodshed, a world that's unredeemed is a reality. Kristallnacht reminds us of that. Among Kaplan's many potent and important messages is that we always should be hopeful. Human beings can grow and change and develop just as Judaism grows and changes in development. And this conference is in many ways a celebration of the creativity that we harness together and are bringing to us today as we try to make the world a better place for learning and for living. I note those things. I also would like to make a couple of thank yous. And though I love seeing Mordecai Kaplan's face, thank you, Karen. A couple of very important thank yous in regard to the conference. I certainly want to, in the course of the day, and this will be an in and out day, it was designed that way. Very few people will be with us all 6 hours. We have nearly 100 people joining us at one point or another during the conference. So I do want to acknowledge the extraordinary continuing support of Jane Susswein, the president of the Kaplan Center. In the 30 years I've known Jane, she's always been an extraordinary advocate for Jewish education. And I also want to acknowledge that in the course of the day, 4 different board members will be joining us. They would be Dr. Mel Scott, Dr. Eric Kaplan, Caitlin Hayes, and Rabbi Michael Cohen. And Mel is with us right now. And finally, I want to draw your attention to 2 people who you see on the screen under Kaplan Center, and that would be Karen Morris, our educator, and Sheridan Luther, our administrator, who have done remarkable jobs, really, putting this together and allowing the learning to unfold. One of the delights of this past year at the Kaplan Center has been the way that we've discovered through the Cedarbaum Prize, you'll hear more about that from Karen later in the day, through the 39 applications we received for 2 prizes in memory of Dan Cedarbaum. One of the extraordinary things is how much we've discovered that people have deep Kaplanian assumptions built into their work that applying to and being part of our process help bring forward. And we've been amazed at how much implicit Kaplan guides the work of Jewish education. And the interesting thing is we wouldn't have known that until we created a framework where people could share it. Similarly, I would like to note that that's never reciprocal. You never know when people are in the Kaplanian world because they work in different portions of it. So I'm guessing there's a bit of asymmetry here. I don't think Mel Scott, our academic advisor and vice president of the Kaplan Center, knew of Miriam Heller-Stern's work before this process began, because Miriam works in a world of Jewish education that Mel appreciates but isn't actively part of. Asymmetrically, on the other hand, we already know that Miriam knew of Mel's work very deeply. You can't be in a Kaplan world without that. And so I hope Miriam will take some pleasure in my turning to Mel and asking Mel to formally introduce Miriam Heller-Stern for her keynote talk. Mel?
Well, it's a pleasure to introduce you, Miriam, and very appropriate for the Kaplan Center. I'm just remembering that Mordecai Kaplan spent 2 years at the Hebrew University in 1937 to 39, and he was professor of education. Uh, so your being here and an expert in education is very, very appropriate. Dr. Stern is vice president, vice provost for educational strategy, national director of the School of Education, and associate professor at Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. She is passionate about empowering Jewish educational leaders and teachers to engage in their work intentionally, skillfully, and creatively. We hope that we do that too. She is the founder of Beit HaYotzer, the Creative Brain Trust, an initiative based at HUC-JAR, designed to catalyze creative thinking and artistic expression through Jewish education and leadership, funded by the Covenant Foundation. Stern is a member of the inaugural cohort of the Mandel Senior Leadership Fellowship at the Mandel Center for Jewish Studies and Jewish Education at Brandeis University. She earned her MA in History and PhD in Social Sciences, Policy, and Educational Practice at Stanford University, which held in 2004 a whole conference of 2 days devoted to Mordechai Kaplan. So we are very, very proud to introduce Dr. Heller.
Thank you for the warm introduction. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's been wonderful to have the chance to spend some time with my colleague, Jeff Shine, who I've known for many years through the Network for Research in Jewish Education, and bond over a shared love of Kaplan's work and influence that has that grounded some of my dissertation work over 20 years ago, but also helped me really frame some of my recent work on creativity and Jewish education, which I'm going to discuss today. I know some people have cameras on, cameras off. If your camera's off and you want to tune in for just a moment in person, just to see other people who are here, you're invited to do so, and then we'll let you retreat back to just listening. But if you would like to just put in the chat to get us started in our exploration of creativity and Jewish education today, your name, where you're coming from, and something creative you did in the past week. So please share. Your name is going to come up automatically in the chat, but where are you writing from? And what is something creative you did in the last week? Just put them in the chat. Wonderful examples of creativity here. So we have Saul Kaiserman, who performed a wedding and created a ceremony collaboratively. Deb creating a rock garden at a nearby lake and painting. Adam writing a new piece of liturgical music. Jeffrey learning Hebrew pronouns, helping someone else learn. Jane Sesswine working the polls. James Green, fall planting in the garden, learning from Torah, teaching a class, helping students make connections between this little light of mine, a variety of Jewish lights, teaching an awesome workshop to a group of educators on SEL, noted. Jen, thank you for being here. Led a Shabbat B'Yachad service for all ages of our congregation. So we see there are a lot of different ways that we each express and enact our creativity and our creativity of thought. Some of the examples include art and painting, and some include cultivation, gardening. There's a lot of teaching and learning here, which is not surprising for a conference such as this. The combination of music, hand, heart, a lot of different modes of expression that are included here. And refining curriculum, teaching, figuring out how to teach on Zoom. All of this involves creative thought. So I appreciate everyone writing in and helping us establish that creativity is a broad and vast enterprise of activities. And what we're going to take on today is the question of how to cultivate creativity in our Jewish educational spaces and amongst our Jewish learners. So I want to get started by just telling you a little bit about what we're going to do today. Creativity is not just about art, although we will be giving some examples of how we cultivate creativity through the arts. But I want to make the argument that the more time we spend creating and consuming art and being environments that produce and value artistic creation and creative thinking, the more well-practiced we'll become in the broader habits of creativity. And these habits of creativity are essential for Judaism to flourish widely, not just amongst a literate or fluent elite, but amongst really all of the Jewish people in a way that can really establish a culture change in the vision that I think Mordechai Kaplan was sharing almost 100 years ago. Now, I was invited to give a keynote. I assured Jeffrey that it would be more of a note in a different key. So I hope that I can share some ideas that will sparkle for you and introduce you to some of the current literature on creativity, bring us back to integrate that with Kaplan's vision for the role of creativity, both in Jewish education and the cultivation of Jewish life, and ultimately take that rationale to some ways of thinking about how do we cultivate the essential habits of creative Jewish thinkers. So before I get into the chomer itself, into the content, I want to tell you a little bit about me. Some of you are new to me. I'm new to some of you. You may be familiar with my work or my bio, but to go beyond it, I want to situate myself a little bit in the topic so you know where it's coming from. So I'm a rabbi's daughter and a rabbi's granddaughter and great-granddaughter and a rabbi's sister and a rabbi's sister-in-law. And so in a way, getting a PhD in education was my way of being the black sheep of the family. And so I grew up in a house that was obsessed with Hebrew and Torah and Jewy puns. But I also got very excited about John Dewey and Jane Addams and progressive educators of the early 20th century who were grappling with how to impact society at the turn of the century. And through those thinkers, I discovered the possibility that education could be transformational, both for the individual and for society. And so I went to study for a PhD in educational policy, and I guess the rest you might say is history. My interest in creativity actually comes from growing up in a house full of books and full of Judaica. Before there was Amazon and daily deliveries were part of normal life, these mysterious brown packages used to arrive at my house usually from either Jerusalem or Philadelphia, where the JPS was located. And the latest commentary or multi-volume set on anything having to do with Bible, philosophy, sociology, my father was quick to order them and would fill his shelves. My late father had a study with 3 walls with shelves, sometimes double and triple stacked. And my understanding of what Jewish education was about, that I imbibed from those years growing up in that house, was that the purpose of Jewish education was to access those books and read those little black letters on those white pages. Sometimes the pages would grow yellow over time, of course. But it was also a house that appreciated Jewish art and expression and music and singing And so those two parts of Jewish culture really complemented each other for me. Now, fast forward, I wound up marrying an Angeleno and settling on the West Coast and being around a lot of people in the entertainment industry, not something I expected growing up in New Jersey. And maybe it's because I was around so many of those wonderful people and began to collaborate with Jewish artists who introduced me to the multilingual access to Judaism through art, through theater, through painting. I began to realize that there were ways to access my own Jewish heritage that I knew so well, but to express it through new media that were new to me. And so I became interested in how to cultivate that creativity, how to become multilingual in the Jewish world that I thought I knew so well through education. And how is it possible to fulfill our Jewish destiny by becoming more creative? Now, my work as a historian still very much influences my views on the possibilities for the future. And today we're talking about what's the future going to look like and how we can build a new set of aspirations for Jewish education. One of my mentors at Stanford, David Tyack of blessed memory, who's one of the foremost historians of education, of the American education system, used to say that historians of education get themselves into hot water with historians because they tend to fall into the trap of being futurists, because people often ask us to predict the future based on things we've seen in the past. And apparently lately, becoming a futurist is a new trendy profession, I have learned. So I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a bona fide futurist, but I do have a few things to say about the future, building on our precious past. A lot of the current discourse on the future, one example is an author named Bob Johansen. He's the author of the book, The New Leadership Literacies. He works at the Institute for Future Thinking, and he writes about how we live in a VUCA world. This might be a phrase that's familiar to people. VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And the basic idea is that we need to accept that the world we live in is wildly uncertain, and we need to arm ourselves with the tools and the relationships and the capacities to manage that uncertainty. This involves creative thinking, novel thinking, original thinking, and applying our wisdom in new ways. Now, I would argue that this is actually something that's not new, even though educational philosophers are talking about this uncertainty as the new thing we need to worry about in education. I would argue that the success of Judaism throughout the millennia has been because we have been resilient and we have been able to adapt throughout time. And so the creative thinking that we need today, in a way, we've been exercising for a long time. And so why focus on creativity in Jewish education? Because we have passed on a tradition of being creative in our thinking in order to adapt and disrupt throughout history. Some examples of what that looks like and what that what that creative thinking throughout history looks like. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs has described the Jewish people as a creative minority. We are history's great problem solvers. And that means, in his words, maintaining strong links with the outside world while staying true to your faith, seeking not merely to keep the sacred flame burning, but also to transform the larger society of which you're a part. We have many examples of Jewish creativity throughout the millennia. Famously, when the Beit HaMikdash, when the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed, we found a way to recreate ourselves, recreate worship in local places, create local houses of worship, as well as strengthening Yavna and creating a strong basis and institutions of Jewish learning. Bible commentary flourished even when surrounded by Christian culture. Jewish philosophy developed in the surrounding culture of Islam. As we've lived in different host societies, we've created new literature, new languages, new music, new food cultures, and in every generation, we have found new ways to communicate, to connect, to adapt our rituals, our customs, our family traditions, to migrate, to survive, and to flourish. And so the question becomes, how do we create a Jewish educational system that will prepare our students, our next generation, to do that? Now let's take a look at what creative thinking looks like outside the Jewish community in the language of the education world today. Okay, so first I want to mention Sir Ken Robinson. His TED Talk, Do Schools Kill Creativity, has over 74 million views. He was a proponent of really making schools more creative and saying that the structure of schools really make it difficult for creative thinking to flourish. He defines creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Imagination is the root of creativity. It is the ability to bring to mind things that aren't present to our senses. Creativity is putting your imagination to work. It is applied imagination. Innovation is putting new ideas into practice. And so here, creativity, similar to the kinds of creativity that you mentioned in the chat when we started this conversation, is about imagination. It's about creating something new. It's not necessarily about art, but it could be. It could be about ideas. Our next thinker, and I want to add to the mix, another definition of creativity coming from the field of affective neuroscience, which is the study of the brain while the brain is learning. Mary Helen Imordino-Yang is a scholar at the University of Southern California, my neighboring institution. I'm at HUC in Los Angeles. And she writes, one could argue that the chief purpose of education is to cultivate children's building repertoires of cognitive and behavioral strategies and options, helping them to recognize the complexity of situations and to respond in increasingly flexible, sophisticated, and creative ways. Neurobiologically and evolutionarily speaking, creativity is a means to survive and flourish in social and cultural context. So creativity becomes the mean to survive and flourish. Let's hold on to that definition for a moment. It's a process that our brains need. It is how we survive in society. And speaking of society, the third link in this chain of thinkers on education today is Mitchell Resnick. He is at MIT. And this book, Lifelong Kindergarten, is based on research on the methods of teaching and learning at the MIT Media Lab, which is an experimental school in Boston and Cambridge. And he writes that the aspiration of education must be that we're going to have a creative society. And he writes, as the pace of change in the world continues to accelerate, people must learn how to adapt to constantly changing conditions. Success in the future for individuals, for communities, for companies, for nations as a whole will be based on the ability to think and act creatively. We can use this transition as an opportunity to promote a more humane set of values in society. Now, this is all new thinking, then thinking in education. And when I discovered that Mordecai Kaplan wrote something very similar in 1934, I nearly fell off my chair. I had studied Kaplan, as I said, a couple of decades ago, and I revisited his vision for Jewish education in his manifesto, Jewish Education, Judaism and Civilization, in order to teach Kaplan in my courses at HUC. And I discovered that he has a whole section on creativity and a vision for creativity that's really quite relevant to how we might think about the aspirations of Jewish education today. And he writes, to be trained as a Jew should mean to be given the habits that would help one function creatively in all of life's situations. Let's think about that for a moment. Imagine the different schools that you might be familiar with. Think about the institutions where you were trained, where you studied, maybe where you went to Hebrew school or even day school, wherever you had your formal Jewish education and where you might teach today. How does this language compare to how you think about the aim and the purpose of Jewish education? To be trained as a Jew should mean to be given the habits that would help one function creatively in all of life's situations. Now, what do we imagine that Kaplan was talking about in terms of life's situations? Let's parse this out. What did life situations consist of in the 1920s and 1930s when Kaplan was articulating this vision? Well, let's see. The aftermath of World War I, the chaos and community that needed to be, the community building that needed to happen in the chaos following an era of unprecedented immigration, a society overcoming the Depression. We might say these are prophetic words when one considers how today our professional futurists are calling for us to be resilient in the face of a world that's going to be unfamiliar and unpredictable. And we think that today's learners are negotiating something, an unprecedented set of circumstances. But in fact, let's consider the seismic shifts in the economy, industry, immigration, ethnic and religious assimilation, nationalism, and world affairs that defined the early 20th century when Kaplan was cultivating his own vision of Jewish education. So life was not easy back then, and being Jewish in the workforce and society was also not easy. So Kaplan's prescription for Jewish education at that time appears to have been timeless indeed. And there is in fact precedent for the times we live in, and there are educational methods that provide the appropriate navigational tools for the chaotic worlds of past and present and future. And I believe that if we adopt a program of creative education, we can cultivate in our learners those habits of mind that will help them build the resiliency, the creativity, and the bold thinking that will enable them to flourish in the world. So I'm going to pause for just a moment, take a look at the chat. I see that there's a lot happening here, and it's hard to follow it all at once. So I just want to take a moment and join you in the chat space. Oh, I see. We're just getting the little quotes. Okay. Fine. Great. Shall I keep going? We're okay? Wonderful. Okay. So moving from the kind of the historical context, let's dive a little bit more deeply into how Kaplan understood the aims of Jewish education, and then we can move from there into a program for future educational success. So when Kaplan spelled out his aims for Jewish education, this is a snippet from the book. And I should say it was really, there's there's a spiritual connective tissue to doing this work. If I were sitting in my office back in Los Angeles, I would have been holding in my hands the volume by Kaplan that I inherited from my grandfather's library. It happens that you may be wondering, why do I seem to be in a strange rustic location? I am actually at a retreat center outside of Jerusalem, part of a global advisory committee on Jewish education that is meeting here. So I do apologize for the strange background, and I do hope that the Zoom and the Wi-Fi here is holding up appropriately. So here's the snippet. I don't have the thick book with me. I did not put it in my carry-on bag to Israel. It is quite a tome. And this appears somewhere roughly, I think it's around page 486, if you happen to have that big original Kaplan volume on your shelf, since I know we are here with the Kaplan Center, and that is what we're doing here today. So Kaplan wrote the following as far as the aims of Jewish education. And again, right, this is almost a century ago. Bearing in mind the elements into which it has been found convenient to analyze the Jewish civilization, the aim of Jewish education may be defined thus: to develop in the rising generation a desire and a capacity, 1, to participate in Jewish life, 2, to understand and appreciate the Hebrew language and literature. 3, to put into practice Jewish patterns of conduct, both ethical and religious. 4, to appreciate and adopt Jewish sanctions and aspirations. And 5, to stimulate artistic creativity in the expression of Jewish values. Now, the fact that creativity, that artistic creativity in particular, makes it into Kaplan's top 5 is, I think, quite significant. He is making a statement here that having a dynamic American Jewish life and a Jewish civilization is dependent on what he says at the bottom: Jewish training of the proper kind, has his sympathies brought in, his tastes refined, and his strivings socialized. And I want to look now at the next paragraph, where he defines what creativity is. And I'm including this because I want us to understand that creativity isn't simply an innate habit that certain lone geniuses are born with. Creativity is not just the expression of artistic talent or technical skill in the arts, but rather, creativity is the result of whole-souled and organic reaction to life's values, of a reaction in which sense, emotions, imagination, intelligence, and will are fully aroused. Now, for the educators in the room who were trained to separate knowledge from emotion, who were trained to parse out educational objectives into columns, cognition and affect, right? What do we know? What do our learners know? What do they believe? How do they feel? We have separated knowing and feeling almost obsessively in education. And the field of affective neuroscience, of study of the brain, is telling us now that actually those processes of the cognitive and the affective are actually codependent. And so Kaplan understood this about just the nature of humanity, that a whole-souled and organic reaction to life's values was going to mean drawing on both the sense and the intelligence, the emotion and the imagination. And it was all an integrative process. It is not enough for a civilization to be rich values of religious or aesthetic nature unless its people respond wholeheartedly to those values. Civilization is artistically sterile. The validity of the present reconstruction of Judaism will be made evident if the Jew will be able to live Jewishly and satisfy every nerve and fiber of his being. Once Jewish life is capable of meeting the emotional, intellectual, and social demands of human living, it will evoke the functional creativity of the artist and the secondary creativity of an audience conscious of art. And so the vision for Jewish education is buoyed by a vision for Jewish life that is a whole-souled experience, and that human living involves both the emotional, the intellectual, and the social demands of human living. And that integration is what enables artistic creativity to happen. And without without artistic expression, that civilization cannot be fully realized. And so I'll go even further back to our Talmudic sources to round out this set of sources that we're thinking about as we build a vision for Jewish education that is a creative vision for Jewish education, to a famous story in Chagiga 3a, where Rabbi Yochanan ben Barucha and Rabbi Elazar Chisma go to see Rabbi Yeshua Bibkian, and they say, "What chidush did you learn today? Right? What new idea? What novel idea came from the Beit Midrash?" And they said, "Well, we're supposed to just learn from the teachers, right?" And of course, the message of the story is, no, there's no such thing as just learning from the teachers. You have to come up with your own chidushim, right? Every day, the Beit Midrash produces a new and novel idea. And so I want to connect the dots between creativity being about original ideas of value, Robinson, the emotional and the intellectual that merge together into those ideals. That's the affective neuroscience. and the possibility that the arts can awaken in us that whole-souled reaction to life and the whole-souled response that enables us to build civilization, to build a flourishing Jewish life and Jewish future, Kaplan. It all comes together into a vision for what's possible if we take creativity seriously, and if we think seriously, not just about what do our students know and what are they able to do, but how do they think? How do they function? How do they flourish? So I've talked a lot about the why, and now I want to turn to the how. And I want to offer 4 essential habits of Jewish creative thinkers. So building on the philosophical and theoretical foundation that I've laid out, now I want to offer my own ideas about what I believe are 4 essential habits of Jewish creative thinkers. These are habits of mind that are cultivated in arts experiences. These draw from a rich literature on the arts. Authors like Elliot Eisner, who has been one of the foremost thinkers in Jewish arts thinking. But if anyone is interested, I can send you a whole bibliography. I have a shelf of wonderful books on studio art classes and the kinds of thinking that goes on in those spaces, museum education, arts experiences, and the kinds of habits of mind that are cultivated in those spaces. And I want to argue that those experiences are what enable us to claim the habits of mind that are essential for a flourishing Jewish life. And those habits are interpreter, creator, curator, and collaborator. And I'm going to now spend a few minutes taking you through each one of these and what I mean by that. I want to say that this is actually the first time that I'm presenting this material. This is a new framework that I'm working on. I appreciate that Jeffrey gave me the permission to use this keynote as the laboratory for my current thinking. He said, share what you're working on. I said, okay, so you're cooking it with me, and I hope that your ideas and your feedback will help me to continue to refine this. I want to offer as a caveat that there certainly must be more than 4 habits of Jewish creative thinkers. I've named these the essential ones because I think that they do bring together an experience of Jewish life that is both timeless and timely. Certainly there are going to be more, but 4 seemed like an appropriate number to start with for today. So let's start with interpreter and what we mean by that. Someone who is an interpreter can do the following, can ask, what might this mean? What does this mean to me? I can pose and answer those questions in a variety of life situations, in the abstract as a form of expression of meaning, and in analysis with real world implications. And so what does this mean, right? This means I have the capacity for chidushim. This means I can come up with those novel ideas to function creatively through interpretation. So I think there's a myth when it comes to the worlds of creativity that all interpretation happens in the cerebral chambers of Jewish learning. Interpretation is what Rashi says about a text, what other commentators say about a text. Maybe it's what we think about the text. But again, going back to that research on affective neuroscience, the interdependence of thinking and feeling enables us to express our interpretations through other mechanisms as well. And so, so in an art class, when we're offering a metaphor or a picture or a poem as an expression of meaning, we're finding another way to interpret what does this particular text or idea or feeling mean to me. Gesture, paint, photograph, they're all languages that enable us to interpret and to express. I know some of us are thinking deeply about efforts to make our learning spaces more inclusive, more equitable, to appreciate and lift up diversity, and linguistically responsive classrooms. That is, classrooms that allow students to express themselves through different modalities, including the arts, are classrooms that enable a different kind of equity to emerge, because not only is the verbal language the primary way to speak and to interpret, but learners can interpret through other languages, the languages of the arts that might be more familiar to them. And when we're speaking in a classroom or in a learning setting with those different languages, we're able to communicate new meanings and see more richness in our lives. The second essential habit is the curator. And here I want to address another myth of creativity. Many of us assume that creativity means that we are creating ourselves, but there's an idea of creativity that is about curating. It's about developing an aesthetic awareness that allows us to choose and to create our own lives. And so a curator asks, how do I learn to prioritize and make values-based choices in a free society where autonomy reigns and authority is questioned? How do I curate my identities, my lifestyle, my relationships, my activities? I have a developed sense of aesthetics, values, and curatorial criteria with which to make choices. When we immerse our learners in arts experiences, and here I'm thinking of performances, galleries, concert experiences, we learn how to become open to being transformed by an experience, an artistic experience that's created by others. And those are learned habits. When we're moved by art, when we choose music to curate a playlist so that we can create a mood, when we choose poems to add to a memorial service or a wedding ceremony or a rally for justice, we may be borrowing other people's words, but the art of putting it together is a way that we curate our lives. And when we curate, we create moods, we create bonds, we create empathy, and we create spiritual experiences. So often, the experiences that we are creating are actually curated out of existing materials, and it's appreciation for those materials that enables us to curate with real empathy for the people around us. And so we need to go through that process of learning why a piece of art or music has intrinsic value and merit. And curating is something that we do in our lives. We have so many choices to make, and we want our learners to be able to cultivate the habits of being able to curate from amongst the many choices they have in front of them. Creator. This, I think, is the obvious one when we think about creativity. What chidushim, original ideas, expressions, solutions, and creations do I want to contribute to my world? What skills, knowledge, language, and relationships will infuse my creations with meaning and value? How do I learn to use the resources and materials available to me to be a creator? And so a creator can create moments, expressions, art, meals, community, ideas, experiences, celebrations. I'll add ceremonies. I'll add learning experiences. We create and we curate when we act as teachers and learners, when we preside over ritual. And imagine an educational setting that's really a laboratory for young learners to become creators of all types themselves. Finally, collaborator. Now, this one really flies in the face of the myth that creating happens by lone geniuses. There's a rich literature on participatory creativity. How many of you have traumatic memories of being thrown into group work in a school setting where you got stuck doing something you didn't want to do, or you somehow managed to weasel out of doing the work because someone else was willing to take on the burden? But imagine if we had group work that actually really played upon the different strengths and contributions of everyone, so that everyone had something magical and grounded and talented to contribute. When we can all figure out what's our role, we can create even more by putting our heads and our hands together. And so being a collaborator is learning, how will I cooperate with the people in my life to interpret, curate, and create together? It's one thing to develop all of the habits individually. It's another to learn how to contribute them to a collective and also to receive from the collective. How does collaborating add value to my life experiences and to the people in my orbit? What different talents, skills, ideas, and expressions do we bring to generate something greater than what could be achieved alone? This is the basis for Kehillah, for Jewish collectivity and community. So there are types of creative activity that might be independent, that might be about the individual, that might be about my own soul searching. But we also must learn to collaborate and bring all of these habits together so that they become the basis of a kehillah, so they become the basis of a civilization, so they become the basis of a community and a society that's functioning, that's thriving, that's flourishing. And so I want to draw these ideas together with a statement from Dr. Elliot Eisner, who was one of the foremost thinkers over the last century on arts and education and the value of arts education for growing the human mind and developing the human spirit. And he defined education as the process of learning to create ourselves. Education is the process of learning to create ourselves. It is what the arts, both as a process and as the fruits of that process, promote. Work in the arts is not only a way of creating performances and products, it is a way of creating our lives by expanding our consciousness, shaping our dispositions, satisfying our quest for meaning, establishing contact with others, and sharing a culture. Now, imagine just placing the word Jewish at the top of that phrase, right? Imagine a Jewish educational enterprise that could be the laboratory, the incubator for the production of Jewish culture. If we were mindful of every activity, every learning experience being a space for practicing to become a legitimate, empowered, authentic interpreter, creator, curator, and collaborator, imagine what we might create, but moreover, imagine what our learners might create for themselves and for the future of Judaism. I'll pause there and invite comments and questions.
If anyone else doesn't have it, thank you so much, Miriam. This is resonating with me so much as an education director, and I've been involved 30 plus years in Jewish education. And one quick question is, well, I don't know, your slides, will you be able to somehow, I was taking notes, but share them with us?
Sure, I'm happy to share them with you. You can share them with the people registered.
Thank you. And one other thought that I had, I never thought of myself as a creative person because I'm not an artist, you know, I can't draw a picture. I don't have that skill, but listening to this, I feel like I am a creative person because I think my personal strengths are collaboration and the curator of that. And so I just kind of want to thank you. It sort of gave me like a really eye-opening feeling on that. So
great.
Really, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. Adam, I see your hand up, but you can feel free to unmute.
Yeah, thanks. This was great. Was taking screenshots the whole time of all the useful things I'm going to bring back to my Hebrew school. And so a question I think I'm generally, so I'm a new rabbi at a congregation in New Paltz, and one question I'm just sort of struggling with generally is lack of time. We have our kids one day a week. And I know, kids, even more so than when I was a kid, 20 years ago, are just super, super heavily programmed and just have a ton to do. And so I love this idea, and I'm just wondering how you would recommend deploying it when you don't have a ton of time with your learners, which I think is the case for a lot of Reconstructionist synagogues.
Right. So the first piece of advice I would give is don't think of this as something extra or additive that you need to program on top of your curriculum. Rather, think about the entire Jewish ecosystem and set of Jewish experiences that you are creating, not just in the hours, the limited hours that you have in school, but you might think about how in the total Jewish experience that you are responsible for in your learners' lives over a lifetime, how might you deploy those experiences for creating these habits of mind? And they can happen in social interactions. They can happen in a cooking festival. They can happen in the creation of an art gallery or an art festival that can happen once a year as a community project. The curation of a healing service or of a memorial service or of a new celebratory ritual, drawing from different sources. It may be that you want to rethink how you manage time and how you create other kinds of programming that aren't just like the art Sunday, but what are some of the experiences that you want to create? Deb, I define a habit of mind as a stance, a disposition, so a way that one thinks, and that way of thinking can be deployed and utilized in many ways in one's life. I've got
Thanks.
Jeffrey,
Very
Jane, and Mel lined up on the top of my screen. Jeffrey, you're still muted.
Come in after. Jane and Mel should go. I'll come in after.
Okay. So Jane.
Okay. I don't consider myself artistic in any sense that we've been talking about, but I helped start a school based on Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And the social, the creativity in a social sense is something that I think we can bring into our classrooms in terms of teaching about tikkun olam and stimulating ideas of how to be with people, how to create institutions and modes of being that aren't artistic in the traditional sense, but are creative. And I think if we can foster that, the confidence in kids that relationships are a source of creativity and institutions that are created to meet needs, that's what occurred to me.
And I think even if our goal is not for students to master the technical skill of the arts, but can be involved in collaborative creative projects together, that is where they will learn to build those relationships and ultimately to build kehilot, to build community, to build collaborative social justice projects and tikkun olam, as you mentioned. Mel, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to add another dimension to your wonderful, wonderful remarks, which I find extremely stimulating. In my reading of the Kaplan diary and sources in Mordecai Kaplan, when he talks about creativity, he talks about it as a way in which the individual brings the divine into the world. In other words, in all of your remarks, I would just add the matter of bringing unity. He talks about creativity as our adding to God's creation and as bringing unity into the world. And I've always found that extremely moving, though it's a complex idea. And I wanted to add that to your remarks.
Thank you. And it's an inspiring and ambitious project for humans, right? It's a way of connecting back to creation itself and to see ourselves as partners in the continuing process of creation. And certainly creative activity is a way of expressing the ineffable, and connecting to the divine is certainly hard to access in words. And artistic expression can help us do that. And thank you for raising that up in the conversation. Deborah.
I just wanted to piggyback on what Mel was saying on the research that I've been looking at in spiritual development, and it's also in the book that Jeffrey helped me out, the God Myth book, Toba's book.
God is here.
The integration of our humanness to the world, to nature, to our mind, everything. We when we're integrated like that, we actually resonate in the same wavelength as the rest of the world. So there's like a huge kind of integration that we're finding in neurology. Like it's beyond, I don't understand it yet, but it's really beautiful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love this spiritual dimension, and I appreciate both of you articulating that as a way to add a finer point on the talk. I appreciate it. I'm going to use it going forward. Thank you.
So Miriam, if it's okay, here I am in my room looking at a beautiful display of plants that my wife has in this room. And I'm pleased to report that no geraniums have died, as a metaphor. But I do take seriously, we have to be alert to everything happening around us. That's where education happens. So we've just gone through an election, and I'm thinking now of the important volume by Robert Bellah of some 40 years ago, Habits of the Heart. So this is also in response to something Jane said, that is there some way which this creativity is at work in the cultural realm? And indeed there is. Cultivating the selves that can be part of a culture of debate and democracy is really very critical. It also reminds me that in Hebrew, lev, this is in regard to Deb's question, the heart is really both the heart and the mind. The same words, there's many different terms. So the notion of tapping into our creative resources and knowing somehow they translate not just to random creativity, but habits of creativity. For me, that's a big meta lesson here. I also put in the chat a note that within the month, the Kaplan Center will be engaging in a project that we call the Great Kaplanian Report Card, and Miriam set us up so beautifully for that, because we'll be looking at those 5 criteria Kaplan gave us in 1934 for a successful Jewish education, and we'll be asking people writ large to respond and share with us how they feel we've done collectively over the last 90 years. And I do note that in January, our monthly webinar is devoted to the Jewish arts. So we'll be looking at that criteria with a microscope. And in February, it will be Hebrew and language. So 2 of those 5 markers of a successful Jewish education will be within our purview. And we thank you for helping create a framework that will be very useful to us as we move forward. I think I'm going to thank Miriam on all our behalf now. It's been such a very full hour. We will get resources to you, including the recording, and Miriam, if you could send me that bibliography on creativity, we will post it. And I think I'd invite you right now. Jane and Mel and I both have our hands raised, but if I went down here and did this, you would see me clapping as well. So I invite people who got something very valuable out of this morning together to use your clap function or just clap as some of you are doing right now. It's been very, very rich. And thank you for
Thank
doing this
you.
from Jerusalem, Miriam. Any final comments you'd like to make?
Thank you for creating a laboratory for some creative thinking for me and to think with you. And I look forward to continuing to refine this framework in partnership with people who care deeply about the integration of the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual. And it's a privilege to be part of this network and this conversation, which I haven't been part of this group before. And I want to just thank the Kaplan Center for sponsoring the Cedarbaum Prize, which is what drew me into the conversation in the first place. I've had occasion of a number of people telling me just how fond they were of him, and I have appreciated the opportunity to learn more about him and be part of his legacy in this way. So I thank you for that opportunity. I am going to sign off to go participate in this consultation in Jerusalem, but it's really been a pleasure and a privilege to be with all of you today. Thank you.
So thank you. I'm going to encourage people to do a 2-minute break in place. Don't lose your connection, because in several minutes we'll turn to the Dan Cedarbaum Prize and have one of our prize winners take us inside her project. That would be Rabbi Bec Richman, who I'll introduce in 2 minutes. Take a good stretch, do some deep breathing. Be back with us, please.
Hey, Jeffrey. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Just as important, are other folks hearing you? Like,
Yeah,
I'm seeing
you
my friend Gail.
Mostly clear. Okay.
And I hope she's hearing you as well. Hi, Gail.
You know what? I just realized I'm actually here on the wrong Zoom account, so I'm going to come back in just a sec.
Okay, very good.
Miriam just put her email. Could you give us that again?
Yeah, I can put it in
the chat for a
here.
minute. She put it up on the screen.
Yeah, it's, I'm going to put it, I'll say it, and then I'll put it in as well. It's mstern@huc.edu. So
Okay.
that should go to everyone. Okay, take some good stretches. We'll be back in just a minute. I saw them. Okay, so Bec, we have you on the right Zoom account now? Very good. Okay, I'm going to introduce you in just one moment.
to bring it over to you?
Yeah, please, Deb. Thank you. Okay, please raise your hand so I can know you're hearing me as we resume again. Good, very good. So I'm sure you won't fall off your chair if I tell you that one of the winners of the Van Cedarbaum Prize for Innovative Jewish Education that was Kaplanian in spirit and innovative in character is in regard to the arts. I think that was such a wonderful dialogue with Miriam Heller-Stern and sets us up perfectly well to take a deeper look at a project that was fascinating to the people who chose the two Cedarbaum Prize winners. And I really have the privilege of introducing the first of them to a friend and a colleague, and that is Rabbi Bec Richman. And Rabbi Richman is a mama, a soferet, a Hebrew calligrapher, a potter who serves on the faculty of the Jewish Studio Project. Bec facilitates scribal arts workshops, community writing projects, participatory Torah repairs, and communities in schools around the country. Her pottery integrates hand-carved Hebrew lettering, and she creates custom ketubot with handwritten calligraphy. Bec is a co-founder of Bayadenu, a Jewish community art studio that integrates Torah, visual arts, and music. She's a graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College, an alumna of the Wexner Graduate Program. And Bec lives in Cleveland Heights in Ohio with her partner and two kiddos. You can find Bec's artwork at kotevetstudios.com. So it's really a pleasure to welcome Rabbi Bec Richman to this sharing platform to talk about her Bayadenu project. And Bec, we're all yours, and we have a full 40 minutes. Should you have questions and have material you want to present, we're in good shape. So thank you for joining us. And I'm going to mute myself and look forward to your talk.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope that you can hear me all right. I'm calling in today from the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton in St. Louis, Missouri, where I am here finishing up presenting at the Rabbinic Assembly Convention. And have spent the week doing this work with rabbis, and it has been just wonderful. And I want to say offer a word of gratitude. Just feeling constantly the pull of motherhood and the physical pull of motherhood in balancing with my work, which is part of why I like to introduce myself first as a mama, because that is truly the full-time work. And I want to give particular credit and shout out to my mom, who's on the call right now, sitting in the hotel room with my 7-month-old baby while she sleeps. And I could not be doing this work in so many ways if it weren't for my mom and her support and her encouragement. So Her name is Barb. Maybe some of you know her. She also is a facilitator of this process that I'm going to talk about, and she's amazing. And I just want to give some shout outs to all the caregivers in our life who make it possible for us to do the work that we do. I recently moved to Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and I live in a co-owned side-by-side duplex with my partner, our kids, and our friends. We are on one side and they are on the other, and talk to me about co-ownership offline sometime. I'm so honored to be the recipient of the Dan Cedarbaum Prize in Jewish Education, to be one of the recipients, and just really humbled by this process. And Miriam, it was so beautiful to hear you speak this morning. So much of what you shared was so resonant with sort of the backstory and ideology that is the foundation really for me of the work that I'm doing. So this prize is giving support for imagining and launching a new Jewish community arts initiative in Cleveland. Our working name, which very may well change at some point, who knows? The working name for right now though is Beyadenu, which means in our hands. And we are founded and we are in the process of founding ourselves on Reconstructionist principles of experiential, evolving, ethical, and creative Torah learning and Jewish living. Centered on Jewish community arts, our vision, mission, and programs bring Jewish arts back into the center of Jewish life and practice. We envision a world where art and music are centerpieces of spiritual and community life. And so the experiences and physical space that we are cultivating this year provide a sanctuary and a platform for dreaming the colorful, song-filled, heart-centered, justice-seeking world we long for into being. So I want to tell you more about this project, but I also want to get us out of the headspace, and I want to actually live some of what I'm working on doing. And I think the best way for me to bring you into that is for you to experience it yourselves. So I want to take you into the process that we're going to be using in our studio space. One of the processes that we are going to start using in the studio space, which is the Jewish studio process. And it's a methodology that integrates Torah inquiry and creative practice in a shared studio space with hope of opening and opening our hearts and quieting our overactive narrative minds and bringing us into the realm of what is yet to be discovered. So that's all very wordy and lovely, and I want to just jump us in. So don't freak out. Even if you don't think that you're an artist, you're not going to have to do anything that you're going to be fine. That's what I want to say. So I think I have screen sharing ability just to forecast what we're doing, where you're going, so you don't feel, so you know where you're going. I'm going to take a moment to listen to a piece of music written by Rabbi Shapiro, who is the co-founder with me of this initiative, and also happens to be my co-house owner, one of the co-house owners. We're going to listen to some music, say a word about what resonates, look at a little piece of text, doodle a little bit, write a word about it, share, and debrief. All you need is a pen and paper or your keyboard. So So take a moment to put a word in the chat that comes up in response to that piece of music. Drop a word in the chat. What reaction do you have? A feeling, an emotion, a color? Peace, more peace, pretty, relaxed, peaceful, calming, rhythmic, and floating, beauty, soothing. I'll add opening. So those words of that composition are ki me'olam ve'ad ata el. And we're going to hop into a moment of text study around those words. All right, let's see here. All right, can everyone see my screen, this blessing? Somebody nod. Yes, okay, great. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishnenu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, holy, wise, well, Spirit of the universe, who has made us holy with your commandments and brought us here to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. So in Hallel, we say these words, Ki me'olam ve'ad olam ata el. One way that we can translate this is for from always and for always, from always and forever, you are El, you are the source, God, the divine. I'm sure that others here have other translations of these words, so welcome those translations, but want to take a moment here as a group for us to open up and just share what images or emotions come to mind when you read this set of words from Hallel. This is the part where you unmute yourself and say something. Okay, I'm just going to start calling on people. Deb. Oh no, okay, Deb, I'm going to come back to you. Bernice, go ahead.
This text reminds me that there is something bigger and more powerful out there, and it helps me to put my own Bishigas in perspective. It's very comforting.
So somehow the grandness of the forever, from forever and forever, there's something beyond the time-bound nature of our lives.
Yes.
Deb, did you want to say
For
something?
me, it's totally integrative. It's like everything together. Like.
Nice. Okay, so some integration. Yeah, Saul.
It makes me curious about why le'olam is not in the language, but ad olam and me'olam. It's unusual for me to hear it with these words.
Can you say more about that for people who don't have context?
Yeah, usually I hear like kind of forever and ever kind of is the usual translation. Le'olam va'ed, I like to infinity and beyond. And so va'ad olam, like seems to me very similar as le'olam, and I'm curious like about that like decision of like slightly different, I guess, prepositions and what the shadings might be.
Nice. Okay, so some intimate and intricate differences in what forever and how enduring forever might manifest. One more here. Yeah, Deborah.
I'm a fourth grade teacher, and we just finished a unit on B'Tselem Elohim. And for me, this just ties that all together, that we talked about how everybody is worthy because we're created in God's image. And this is God is forever and ever. And we live on through offspring and stuff like that. And that's where mine.
Beautiful. So if we are created in the image of the divine and the divine endures, then there is a piece of us that also endures. And we know this also from Fred, I'm thinking of, you would say this better than me, but or my mom, but we know that energy is constant and consistent, and that are part of the things that make up us, the energy that makes us up actually doesn't necessarily die, but is recycled and re-put into the earth. That energy actually becomes something new. Mel, and then I'm going to move on to the second question.
No, whenever I pray, and particularly the Hallel, I think of a very interesting concept from Mordecai Kaplan, and a word which I use and I'd like to offer you, and that is our tendency to thingify. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful word. In other words, what we do is we tend to create entities, and that's what we do, particularly theologically. And Kaplan would have us return to the elements of process that precede and succeed the matter of those entities. And creativity is certainly part of that process. And this quotation, "Me olam bi'ad olam," what we said, Fred, the eternity and the eternality are matters of process, and that's what's important. And we need to prevent ourselves from thingifying, from turning that into a entity.
Thank you so much. It's such a helpful also transition to the second question and why the second question is here. For me as a Reconstructionist and as a someone who has spent a lot of time at Camp Havaya, our summer camp, we were actively encouraged to push back, not to push back, but to ask big questions and to sort of like move beyond the not just the pshat, the plain meaning of the text, but the pshat or normative and plain meaning of how the text has gotten interpreted by sort of like the masses Jewishly. So for me, when I read this text, one way of thinking about this is to, Mel, I think this is what you're talking about, is to thingify, to think about God in this, sort of like this one entity that exists, that has existed and continues to exist. And that might serve folks. And if it does, that's great. But another question that raises for me, I think like what rests under the surface for me is that there is something that is enduring. So I want to ask folks to think for a moment, what are the enduring forces that are present in your life? Maybe that's God, maybe that is love, maybe that's connection to nature, maybe that is nature or wind. So what are the enduring forces that are present in your life? Let's just come off mute and name a few, something that endures in your life.
Hope.
Connection to my family and community.
Love in nature.
What endures in my life is my quest for understanding. I have spent my life trying to expand my consciousness and to learn. And that is the major motivation in everything that I do. And so I appreciate your contribution to that process.
Thank you. And I'm seeing also here in the chat, connection, love, hope, striving, relationships, happiness, love, nature, community, Torah, family, connections, and cycles of creation, the grandeur of nature. So I want to take this with us into just 5 minutes of using materials to explore whatever is live for you in this moment. So I'll tell you what that means in a second, but want to sanctify the process of creating just as we sanctified the process of Torah study. This blessing was written by Rabbi Adina Allen, who's the co-founder and creative director of the Jewish Studio Project, the organization that is home to this methodology that you're experiencing right now called the Jewish Studio process. And this blessing sanctifies the ongoing work of creation that we, Devorah, as you were saying, get to do as created in the image of a divine creator. Baruch atah Adonai mekor hachayim, shebara otanu betzalmo, umazmin otanu lechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh breshit. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer yetzirim. Blessed are you, God, who created us creative. So I'm going to collectively hold an intention for us today, that we explore what is enduring. And I want to invite you to find a piece of paper and a pen, or if you happen to have other materials that are on hand, cool, or your keyboard and anything that you can type into. We're going to take 5 minutes to play with materials. Materials could be a pen and paper, it could be your keyboard. And we always start our studio time by making a mark and seeing where that mark can take us. So no matter what you think of yourself and your creative capacity, I assure you that you have the ability to make a mark on a page with a writing instrument or with a word, and then see what happens. So spend 5 minutes in flow. And I'm going to share back this music to be another source of inspiration for us as we create.
Bec, I think you might have to unmute so we can hear the music.
Take about another 1.5 minutes with materials. And find your stopping place. So now I invite you to position yourself where you can see your piece. And we're going to take 2 minutes to write in response to the piece. So start by writing with an observation of what you see. What is on the page or what was created, describe it, and then move into a couple of minutes of free writing in response to the piece and in response to the process. So start with what you see and then move into flow.
Do you want this in the chat room? This is just for ourselves.
Thank you for clarifying. Just for yourself for now.
Can you repeat the instruction?
Begin with, just take a moment to write in reaction to the piece. So begin with writing what you see, describe what you see, and then move into free write. So I'll put that in the chat as well. Take just another moment. And come to a stopping place. And the final piece of the process is witness reading. So you don't have to read anything that you wrote. And I know that it was fast. Normally this process is at least an hour, or normally when we practice, we give ourselves at least an hour. I want to invite you to hold up your piece and don't tell us about the piece. Don't describe it. Just read one word from your witness. Just read out loud one word from what you wrote. So we're going to take turns doing this. So Deb, I'm going to call on you first.
Why seeds? I recently read a piece from Little Garlic. It reminds me of the pumpkin experience at Agnon.
Thank you.
Is that what you mean? One word?
Yeah, something like that. Devorah.
Family.
Thank you. Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you're muted still.
You're muted, Jeff.
Deeper.
Thank you. Gail.
Sideways.
Thank you. Taryn.
Childhood.
Thank you. I'll read. Torn. Bernice.
You couldn't really tell, but it was a rainbow.
Thank you.
And I just wrote it to me, it just connected.
Oh, it's okay. Just the word,
Oh,
from your
sorry,
witness.
rainbow.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So I want to invite you to put your piece aside and your writing aside, and we'll come back together in this iteration of the group. So what you just experienced was a little taste of the Jewish Studio process, which is the methodology that we are going to be using in Beyadenu in this initiative to guide much of what we are going to be doing together. Also, just ask if folks are still unmuted, you can remute yourself. Much of what we're going to be doing together. We are launching after Thanksgiving monthly gatherings in Cleveland around Rosh Chodesh to bring ourselves into the rhythm of Jewish time which for me is one of the most powerful pieces of Kaplanian ideology of really bringing ourselves into the space and the environment that we're in. So bringing us into the rhythm of Jewish time. We're going to be having a song circle, which will be led by Micah. Some of it will be his own music, some of it will be music from others, and followed by a Jewish studio process, using this process as in a studio. And the texts that we are exploring are all going to be from the music that we are singing and sharing, so that we are sort of like opening up the words through different modalities of music, of visual arts, and in writing. And at the end of the year, we plan to have a hopefully large community event where we have a studio gallery of some of the pieces that are created, as well as a large community sing. So we're doing this so that we can bring Torah to life through active, tactile, and sensory experiences in this dual art music studio. Learning Torah through study and discussion, but also bringing Torah beyond the written word, the page, the conversation, and letting words and ideas come to life in tandem with our own inspiration through this music and visual arts. So I just want to close out here, and then I'll give space for questions, but just want to close out here by saying that for me, what is one of the most powerful calls to this work is the call from Mishnah Pirkei Avot 5:22, that we should turn and turn Torah, turn and turn it again and again, because everything is in it. And to turn something over, to examine it from a new angle, to question it, to challenge it, to challenge ourselves to be in different relationship with it. This is not only a rabbinic value, it's also a contemporary reconstructionist approach to Torah and to life. I believe that we need art and music because they push us to ask why, to transform and to form anew. And creative work reminds us that what is in our world is not what has to be, that we can so often, not always, but so often we can recast the raw and create and chaotic into something still imperfect, but beautiful and hopefully whole. And that is what we're gonna try to do. So I want to take a few minutes to open up if folks have questions. Yeah, Meryl.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, well, first of all, I'm a geriatric chaplain. I deal a lot with end of life. And I noticed that all of the comments, especially when you asked the question for what is enduring in your life, were positive and uplifting. But there is another side. I wrote in the chat, probably a little too late for people to see, Tzurot and challenge. And that too is enduring in our lives. And I think this is a powerful way also for helping our our communities, and I'm thinking, right now post-election, through tsuras and through difficulties, that we shouldn't only be thinking of the positive, but also there is another side to our human experience that really needs this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. I was thinking of death when I asked that question, and I think part of the idea, certainly part of the methodology and part of the idea behind it, is that it helps us to navigate the chaos in the world and navigate the unknown and the challenges and the reality of the hardships, and to do so with connection and meaning. Yeah. Jeffrey, you're muted, but I see you're trying to say something. Oh, no, you're not. Okay, Tavora, did you want to say something?
Somebody had asked about the Rosh Chodesh thing that you were doing in Cleveland, and if there would be a way to join electronic.
Great question. We are going to start off in person. I think that I will say that I teach through the Jewish Studio Project. I facilitate through the Jewish Studio Project, and there's public programs that are available for free for anyone. And I also run my own online art studio, Jewish art studio, that I'm happy to share information with folks on. But we really want to create a localized space and experiment with what can happen locally that could then be a model or framework that others can take across, into their own communities, and maybe we'll be able to eventually expand. But for now, we really want to start locally and see what can happen as we start small.
Thank you.
I have a question, Bec, but it's premised on, you joined us for the end, I believe, of Miriam's talk, but were you there the whole time? You were there. Okay. So she, I think, is trying to project a kind of shlemut, a fullness to the arts. And I think that you're after the same thing too. It's not a single kind of art or expression. But I wonder if you have some thoughts about how it hangs together in terms of the multidimensionality of the arts.
Yeah, I mean, Miriam, I think one of the things, is Miriam here? I don't see her.
No.
One of the things, okay, well, one of the things that, thanks, Mom. My daughter Adar is waking up, so Babi is signing off, she says. Thank you, I love you. One of the things that struck me what Miriam was talking about was sort of the creativity, and I think, Karen, this also impacted you. I heard you say earlier that creativity is not just about the products that we make, but about sort of like the frameworks that we bring to everything that we're doing in our lives. And that really resonates with me. And I think that's part of what I hope to expand on and build on in the studio. Some of our programs, I think we're going to start with using the Jewish studio process, but I also am curious what else there might be that's beyond the Jewish studio process as ways for people to engage creatively with tradition. And sometimes that's going to mean Torah learning, and sometimes that's actually not about Torah learning. It's about using the modality of chavruta as a model for the way that we engage with each other, not just learning Torah. So sometimes we learn Torah, and sometimes we're going to learn contemporary poetry, but use the model of chavruta and use Jewish principles in structuring our space and in guiding us. So I think, yeah, sometimes it's about the colors and the forms that we're working with, but I think it's, as my understanding from what Miriam was saying, is so much more than visual arts alone, or than any one modality alone. Yeah, Deb.
Who's going to choose the flow, the question, the perspectives of things to be looking at? How's that going to emerge?
You mean who's going to be facilitating these sessions?
No, where are the ideas coming from? Like, how does one, how are you going to make it all happen?
So Mike and I are working collaboratively. He's picking the music, probably, mostly. He's going to pick the music, and we're going to chavruta with each other together on the questions that are live for us. I think part of the framework here is that the facilitator is also a participant. So there is the agenda is you've heard the agenda, which is to get people to be in relationship with tradition in creative ways. Mm-hmm. Music, art, that's the mission, to get art to be front and center in our experience as Jews. So there's no particular ideas necessarily in any text that we bring forward that we want people to sort of come away with. We are bringing questions that are intended to open up that text. And so that takes a lot of prep and time to make sure that to try to, think about how the questions are and how they're guided and what space they open up. So Micah and I do that together, and then, and we don't know where the questions are going to take us.
So I heard in Deb's question also, this clearly is not just facilitator driven, but facilitators play a critical role up front. How much is it also learner center and learner driven? In other words, can you imagine reversing course or going in an entirely different direction because some of the people who are part of the group have a deep interest in X, Y, or Z.
Totally. I mean, I think that for me, it feels really important that the space is held in a structured and boundaried way. I think that that helps learners to feel often more comfortable or secure going into like a known process or known structure, and to be, yeah. And I think, you know, I'm starting a mama's group experiment of this with moms tomorrow, actually. And we are structuring it there in a way that I hope will eventually get to in Cleveland, which is that different people can bring different texts forward or different sort of source material forward that we are turning over. I think it feels important to me to have Micah and I facilitating the structure, but it in no way means like we are not experts in anything beyond the organizing and the structuring there, and want to bring, as I said, you know, Jeffrey, in my application, you know, this is the idea behind this methodology and the process that we hope for is to democratize the learning experience, to really empower people to bring forward what they are turning over, and to also, yeah, just to say that like the questions and the insights that people have in the Beit Midrash and in the studio are our source material as well. So I hope that answers the question a little.
It does, thank you. I think we have time perhaps for one more question or comment.
Mel, go ahead. But you have to unmute, Mel.
Kaplan not only talked about creativity, but he himself was creative in an unusual way, and people don't ordinarily think of him as a creative person. It's not exactly drawing that he was creating, but in the plastic arts. And I don't know if you can see this. This is a bust of his father that he created. He loved his father very, very much. And at one point he was into creating in the medium, in the plastic medium. And this is in my biography of Kaplan. And you see his father, and you see the bust, and you see how well he did. And it's an expression of his deepest love for his father. And I think I want to add that as a element, in other words, to express what is deeply felt within you will give rise to perhaps significant art.
Yes, beautiful. That's such a, thank you so much. I'd never seen that piece before. And that's such a helpful place for us to end on, that this is really about bringing forward what is on and in our hearts, and softening, opening up to the wisdom that is within, and letting that be part of what we get to do as Jews. More to say about that another time, but I just want to say thank you so much, everyone at the Kaplan Center, and so humbled for this, to have this opportunity. I'm really grateful.
Thanks, Bec and Yashar Kochech, for that fine presentation. And again, congratulations on receiving one of the Cedarbaum prizes. We're going to take a 5-minute break. As I think many of you are aware, we have a lot of people rolling into this, and the biggest rush of people will probably happen in the afternoon when the Reconstructionist Educators of North America join the Kaplan Center conference. But next up in our agenda is an opportunity to study with other people who turned in extraordinary proposals as we went through the Cedarbaum process. And I want to encourage people during the 5-minute break, keep your Zoom link on, but to do as I have. My last name is not Mishmash, I'm still Jeffrey, but I am looking ahead to the next set of workshops. Some of you sent us your choices, and Sheridan has already put you into a breakout room. we'll focus on that in a few minutes. Other folks we invite who didn't choose a workshop, Sheridan will help you get to the right breakout group. And there are 4 choices, as I think you are aware. There's the Jewish Artist of the Week with Devere Kahana. There's the Stolen Beam with Jeffrey Gold and Devorah Jacobson. There's the Mishmash Talmud Project with Sarah Lev, Rabbi Dr. Sarah Lev, and Michael Sokolovsky. And there is the Deep Dive into Prayer, Immersive Prayer with Eliana Light. So if you could rename yourself with your first name and then the group of those 4, we'll put them in the chat as well, that you'd like to go into, that will help us 5 minutes from now maximize the time for that next set of workshops. So again, take a stretch. It's a long day. I hope you agree. I'm getting emails saying how rich this is in chat. So I hope for you it's equally rich, but we need to do a Meshivat Nefesh. You need to give yourself a break and recharge your soul. So do some stretching in place, some deep breathing, whatever it is, and use this 5 minutes also to give us the name. You can just do a single word. We'll get the message. That will help Sheridan put you in a group. Okay, Hafsakah, 5-minute break. See you soon.